Well, for all of you who gave to ABC Radio's Pakistan Appeal on Friday, can I just say thank you. So many of you generously donated money to help the millions of people in Pakistan who have been affected by the worst floods in the country's history. Our flood appeal was held across all ABC Radio networks, and it raised more than $5 million for the two main agencies involved, that's UNICEF and the Australian Red Cross. Many of you, I know, also gave to other charities working on the ground in Pakistan. Norman Gillespie is UNICEF's chief executive, and he joins us in the breakfast studios this morning. Norman, welcome to breakfast.
Good morning, Fran.
A positive result, $3 million raised for UNICEF alone from ABC Radio listeners?
Absolutely phenomenal. What a reaction. There was a really muted response to this disaster of epic proportions before Friday, and the ABC listeners and the networks have really triggered a very generous wave of giving. More
than you expected, $3 million for UNICEF alone?
Absolutely, because this was really in about 48 hours. I think initially we thought, gosh, $500,000 would be wonderful to have $1 million, but $3 million by late last evening.
And so how do you explain that avalanche just simply by the fact that ABC Radio was promoting it? I mean, the crisis happened, Australia was in election mode, people were focused on other things. Was that part of the issue? What do you put it down to, the fact that you've had such a dramatic response?
It's actually a month today since the emergency was declared. So it was rather inexplicable, but there were many distractions. I think what we're hearing from listeners who were ringing in saying, look, we were wanting to do something. We didn't know how, we didn't know where, we didn't know when. Hearing it on the radio has given us the reason to pick up the phone.
Let's give people a sense of what their money does, how far their money goes. A $100 donation, for instance, what does that do in terms of UNICEF's work in Pakistan?
Well, our focus is very much on clean water, nutrition and vaccination. So $100, for example, vaccinates 660 children for polio. $100 buys 100 packets of high nutrition biscuits. $100 buys 1,000 sachets of oral rehydration, because one of the real problems now is the condition of the children. A lot of them are malnutrition, a lot of them have got diarrhea, and we're now worried about waterborne diseases. So these three things are really our main focus.
On a grander scale, I mean, there's no underestimating the urgency of this money. I think of the money pledged, you've already spent $1 million of it, is that right?
Our responsibility is to get that money out as quickly as possible to where it's needed most. So we did.
So what kind of time frame do we talk about?
We're talking about days. Last night we transferred $1 million, and we've got our people working around the clock to process the donations so that we can get them into the bank and across to Pakistan literally in a matter of days.
And so the money goes to Pakistan, and then from there, people on the ground purchase these, vaccines or whatever it is that you need.
Absolutely. And it's getting it out as fast as possible to the north, to the south, to all over, because $3 million is fantastic, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. The situation there is pretty dire, and we need to keep going, and we need to keep supplying the people on the ground with what they need to save more lives.
Norman, I mentioned on Friday that I'd heard one ABC caller just voicing some doubts about, or reluctance to give, not because she didn't want to help the people of Pakistan, but she was worried about the money not being basically just used for corrupt purposes, not disappearing in sort of corrupt governance. What kind of hit rate do you have in terms of UNICEF of how much money from the donated dollar goes directly to aid on the ground?
It's a very good question. It's one that we are at pains to say that we don't work for a government, we work with governments. The money goes through our channels to our people through our accounts. So we're saying at the moment that at least 90 cents, and I'm hoping it's more like 95 cents in every dollar, is going directly to the aid workers themselves in this instance.
That's a very high proportion. Not a lot of it is siphoned off to admin costs and things.
That is our responsibility, and we take that very seriously.
The UN overnight has appealed again to the world to provide water purification units, family hygiene kits and other items needed to increase access to clean water in Pakistan. Is that the biggest direct need and direct threat, put it more bluntly?
It absolutely is, because initially there was a death toll of 1,500. That has stayed steady. What we're worried about is the second wave coming from the waterborne diseases. So that is coming from unclean water. As people go back to their homes in the north where the water is receding, they'll be surrounded by unclean water. And in the south, it's a different situation. The dikes are still breaking, the floods are spreading, and that's simply about rescuing emergency people with nutrition. So water is the main problem. Water purification tablets, getting wells fixed, getting trucks of water to where it's needed. All of those things are what we're focused on.
And even then, there's problems beyond that, of course. I was speaking to Sally Sara, the ABC's correspondent on the ground on Friday, and a lot of her reports have focused on the illness amongst children, the deaths amongst children, noting that many of them were already malnourished before the floods hit.
That's correct. This is one of the poorest countries in the world, and 30% certainly weren't vaccinated against any disease. And in situations like this, those immune systems become very low, very susceptible, and diarrhea is one of the things we fear most.
Just finally, what do you see as the key challenges now for you and your teams in the weeks and months ahead? And I guess you need more money to pay for that, whatever it is.
The Australian people, your listeners, have responded so generously. The compassion has been so inspiring. We need to keep that going. We need the flow of funds. We'll be concentrating on getting it out there as quickly as possible. But really, this is a disaster of mega proportions. All
right, Norman, good luck and thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Norman Gillespie is UNICEF's Chief Executive, joining us in the breakfast studio this morning. You can still make donations, of course, to the UNICEF Pakistan Appeal at unicef.org.au or by calling 1300 884 233 1300 884 233. The ABC's the ABC's Pakistan Appeal on Friday raised $3 million for UNICEF. The Red Cross has reported $2.1 million raised on Friday, and many of the other charities too, I'm sure. And I know some of you were worried that we didn't mention Médecins Sans Frontières on Friday in our list of charities, even though Sally Sara told us they're doing great work on the ground. The list we used was simply the list that AusAid provided. Of course, you can give to any charity that you want to, and yes, MSF is there on the ground in Pakistan. It's 8:12 on RM Breakfast.
Next on The Book Show, the reading lives of scientists. Environmental scientist Tim Flannery, astrophysicist Rachel Webster and medical biologist Doug Hilton talk about the books that shaped them.